Deep within a dense and overgrown forest lies a mysterious, secluded location. A blonde figure, soon revealed to be the master, casually applies bright lipstick. A young maid disciple furiously scolds her master for leaving his socks inside out once again. Frustrated by the chore, she mutters under her breath about how annoying older folks are when they try to look young. The flamboyant master fiercely glares down at the little girl, demanding to know what she just whispered. An establishing shot reveals their grand but aged castle standing tall amidst the lush, blooming greenery. Standing together in the garden, the imposing master strikes a confident pose beside his exasperated maid. Shock suddenly washes over the maid's face as she realizes the missing clothing item is completely gone. Frantically trying to calm down, she searches the area while desperately insisting she put the sock right there. Rummaging through a laundry basket, she cries out to her master in utter disbelief that the missing item is nowhere to be found. Furious, she orders him to stop eating because they lack time, reminding him she is currently searching for his socks. Unfazed and sipping tea, the master stubbornly refuses, arguing he wants to enjoy the hot meal he went to the trouble of cooking. Sighing heavily, she reminds him he specifically requested those socks today, while he simply commands her to sit down quickly before the food gets cold. Sitting down to eat, she happily praises her master for preparing such an amazing breakfast. The master boastfully claims it is obvious given he is the noble mage Lucas Paley, prompting her to call out his slightly sarcastic tone. After she finally spots one sock, he carelessly commands her to find the other quickly as soon as she finishes eating. As she asks him to put his foot out and begs him to be careful, he scoffs at the idea of actually keeping a promise to a servant. Continuing her task, she dryly assures him she will keep his arrogant attitude in mind. The master abruptly orders her to get ready in 15 minutes, to which she quickly agrees. Without warning, the master leans in intimately close and grasps her face firmly in his gloved hands. She yelps in pain as he suddenly pinches her cheek in retaliation for her earlier disrespectful remarks. Rubbing her sore face, she steps back and declares that the dressing task is finished. Walking away, the master sternly warns her never to order him around. He calls her a cheeky brat who is 100 years too early to be bossing him, while she silently reflects on the insolent man's behavior. The maid formally introduces this arrogant man as her master right as he announces his departure. Now outside enthusiastically hanging up crisp white laundry, the girl reveals her name is Arya. Arya explains she serves as a housekeeper and disciple to the genius mage Lucas in the Mistaka forest, a dangerous den of monsters. She recalls wandering into this deadly forest 7 years ago as a runaway with no memories, where she was apparently saved by her master. Kneeling in the dirt to tend the garden, she acknowledges that this environment is not exactly meant for human survival. However, they are able to live safely within the old castle because Master Lucas has erected a powerful protective barrier around their home. Drowsily nodding off, Arya quietly reflects that her peaceful life is all thanks to her master. As a genius mage renowned for both his beauty and brains in the capital of Basel, Lucas constantly attracts an endless line of female customers eager for his top-tier potions. Despite his immense talent, he suffers from terrible spending habits, frequently rejects jobs he dislikes, and is so incredibly sloppy that he never puts his supplies away. However, beneath his difficult and moody exterior, he also possesses a surprisingly protective and guardian-like side. This hidden kindness is proven by how he diligently treats the painful burn scars left on her face every single day without fail. Her quiet contemplation is abruptly shattered by a magical communication alert as Lucas hastily orders her to prepare the reception room for an incoming guest. Stepping casually into the room, a scruffy and slightly scarred man named Zeke raises his hand and casually apologizes for the sudden intrusion. Recoiling from his faint old man scent, Arya openly scowls in disgust upon realizing that their uninvited guest is none other than Zeke Amond. Beneath his unkempt appearance, this man's true identity is the guild master of Harvey, notorious as one of the most troublesome guilds in the entire capital. Slumping comfortably onto the sofa, Zeke acknowledges the poor timing of his visit but insists he is not here for a standard job request, confirming Arya's suspicion that he only brings trouble. Standing firmly with his arms crossed, Lucas sarcastically demands to know why Zeke would ever bring him a job outside his specialty while insisting he deserves praise for not making a scene at the shop. Smirking with absolute confidence, Zeke attempts to sway the stubborn mage by promising that the payout for this particular task will be incredibly generous. Recognizing her master's notorious spending habits, Arya gasps softly in sudden realization as the temptation of a high reward hangs in the air. Frantically panicking at the thought of danger, she immediately begs Zeke to stop bringing hazardous jobs that might get her precious master hurt. As Lucas smugly reassures her that he never messes up such things, Zeke silently notes to himself that Arya is likely the only person in the world who genuinely worries about the arrogant mage. Playfully stretching her cheeks, Lucas teasingly scolds her for making an ugly face while Zeke laughs heartily and declares it perfectly natural for a disciple to deeply respect her master. Brushing off the playful distraction, Lucas impatiently commands Zeke to hurry up and explain the details regarding the temporary party they formed the other day. Leaning forward, Zeke explains that the enchanting female mage from their previous encounter has specifically requested to work with Lucas once again. A heavy, deadpan silence immediately falls over both Lucas and Arya as they simultaneously process the incredibly predictable and annoying request. Rejecting the offer without a second thought, Lucas casually waves his hand and points out that it is strategically pointless for two wind attribute mages to team up. Unsurprised by this incredibly common excuse, Arya silently rolls her eyes while Zeke weakly argues that the client specifically wants a water healer and knows Lucas can handle all magical attributes. Arya internally reflects that while it is common for women to fall for his stunning outward appearance, her selfish master takes immense pride in his beauty but absolutely despises being swarmed because of it. She recalls his arrogant philosophy, where he firmly believes that the human desire to pick and display beautifully blooming flowers is nothing more than pure, selfish arrogance. Staring down in quiet sorrow, she painfully questions if her own deep attraction to his beauty makes her just another sinful admirer swarming the untouchable flower. Paralyzed by fear, she worries that if he ever discovers she harbors the exact same romantic feelings as those annoying clients, he will surely despise and permanently reject her. Resigning herself to a bittersweet silence, she solemnly vows to keep her romantic feelings locked safely within the depths of her own heart. Surrendering to Lucas's absolute and stubborn refusal, Zeke sighs in total defeat and agrees to tell the disappointed client to give up on the matter. Suddenly shifting his focus away from the stubborn mage, Zeke turns his attention toward the startled maid and calls out her name. Staring directly at the bewildered girl, he casually brings up the topic of his next official guild request. Catching the young maid completely off guard, Zeke boldly asks if she has any interest in leaving Lucas to become a dedicated cleaning lady for his own guild. Stepping quietly through the rain, Arya approaches the old stone building with a lantern in hand. Inside, the dim room is a complete disaster of overturned tables and scattered debris. Holding her lantern high, Arya looks around in surprise and realizes that this messy place is Zeke's guild. Surveying the chaotic wreckage on the floor, she mutters to herself in quiet understanding. Beaming with newfound optimism, she excitedly declares that getting paid to clean this place and finally uncovering the floor might actually be a great job. Remembering how her master tried endlessly to stop her, she pumps her fist and vows to do her absolute best since it is a rare request. Rolling up her sleeves with determination, she asks herself if she is ready to begin the hard work. Wielding her broom with practiced skill, the young maid swiftly sweeps the dusty floorboards. Standing proudly with her hands on her hips, she admires the sparkling room and declares it quite clean. Gazing at her trusted tool, she notes that while supplies were provided here, bringing her own little brush was definitely the right choice. Her mind drifts back to a time long ago when she pestered her master to let her help, and the first thing he ever gave her was this deck brush. Spinning the brush gracefully, she notes that it has become an indispensable partner that fits her hand perfectly. An urgent notice on the board calls for a red dragon subjugation, warning that the beast is injuring many and disrupting the mining site. Staring at the intimidating poster, Arya gasps in awe that such dangerous requests exist for those confident in their skills. Breaking her focus, Zeke cheerfully walks in and greets her with a warm morning welcome. Bowing respectfully, Arya eagerly asks for her pay, surprising the man with her unusually quick demand for money. Stroking his chin with a slightly troubled expression, Zeke murmurs that the situation is a bit bad. Panicking and vigorously shaking the poor man, Arya desperately promises to put her back into it and do better next time. Smiling warmly, Zeke hands her a pouch and explains that the pay he prepared doesn't quite cover the massive amount of work she finished in a single day. Overjoyed that her hard work resulted in extra pay and some time off, Arya gleefully thanks him for his generosity. A sudden thought strikes her wide eye as she processes her success. Bursting into the castle library, she cheerfully announces her return to her master, who calmly welcomes her back from behind his book. Sneaking up closely behind him, she smiles widely as he notices her silent approach. Thrusting the pouch of coins forward with a massive grin, she proudly demands he accept what she earned that morning. Stopping her celebration, the master sternly orders her to listen. Pointing a sharp finger at her face, he demands her absolute attention. Nervous but resolute, she agrees with his earlier point that her earnings aren't so small that she'd have to sponge off him for living expenses. Looking down at her hands, she softly explains that her creepy face made it impossible to find work in the past, and she fears starting weird rumors that could trouble him. Looking up with a gentle, tearful smile, she admits that she is always relying on his care anyway. Closing his eyes with a defeated sigh, the master relents and accepts her stubborn dedication. Arya graciously accepts the witch hat placed on her head, whispering her quiet thanks. A bright, genuine smile washes over her face as she beams with absolute joy. Gazing at the delicious, freshly prepared food, she enthusiastically agrees with her master. The master suddenly shifts the conversation, asking if she has ever laid eyes on an official guild request. Arya confirms she has, prompting the master to excitedly announce that a particularly interesting request has just come in. Pondering his words, she admits her admiration for monster hunting and caravan escorts despite her inability to do them, leading him to note her interest. Sipping her tea, she playfully adds that she never gets the chance to see his serious side in action either. Lucas strikes a flawlessly handsome and pensive pose, leaving Arya momentarily starstruck by his divine appearance. Startled back to reality, she stammers as she nervously assumes the request is just the usual mundane task. Leaning in close with a piercing gaze, he questions if she already saw the target today, leaving her thoroughly confused. Ignoring her bewilderment, he abruptly declares that their departure was decided an hour ago, forcing her into compliance. Suddenly teleported to a harsh, rocky landscape, a panicked Arya screams to know their location, only to be told they are in the Golden Mountains. Still reeling from the sudden jump, she questions his reckless timing just as he points out the massive dragon she supposedly wanted to see. Terrified and refusing to move forward, she hysterically points out that their normal clothes offer zero protection against dragon flames and that this is pure suicide. Scoffing at her cowardice, the genius Mage shushes her and calmly points out that the beast is already approaching them. Utterly paralyzed by fear, Arya lets out a breathless, terrified gasp as the reality of the situation sinks in. A striking conceptual portrait captures Arya dressed as a proper witch, complete with a dark hat and a solemn raven perched on her shoulder. Blinking through the chaos, she wipes her trembling face as a sudden, confusing realization begins to dawn on her. Staring at his dense disciple, the master casually reveals that she is only still alive because he is actively granting her his magical protection. He chillingly explains that without his barrier, the toxic environment would have instantly rotted her lungs and killed her on the spot. As Arya screams that the approaching dragon is impossibly colossal, Lucas mockingly asks why she expected a night-level subjugation target to be small. The massive beast lunges violently, forcing the master to quickly snatch Arya out of harm's way while commanding her to hold on. Setting her down safely, he praises her with a smirk and orders her to sit tight and enjoy the spectacle she so deeply admired. Stepping up to face the colossal threat, the confident mage extends his hand as glowing magical energy begins to violently swirl around his fingers. With a commanding presence, Lucas unleashes a blindingly complex magical formation that shatters the surrounding air. Watching the sheer power unfold before her eyes, Arya is suddenly struck by the memory of an ancient magic lesson she was taught long ago. Her mind recites the fundamental elements of life, recalling the spirits of light, water, fire, metal, wood, wind, earth, and darkness that govern all creation. She remembers that magic users are strictly ranked, distinguishing between standard wizards who wield single attributes and the elite sorcerers capable of compounding multiple elements. The profound realization of the hierarchy of power hangs heavily in her thoughts as she watches her master defy all logic. Trembling with awe, she finally grasps her master's true rank, realizing he stands at the absolute pinnacle as an existence capable of manipulating nearly every attribute known to the world. Standing before the beast, Lucas boldly declares he isn't some commoner as Arya watches in shock and warns him about the impending roar. Channeling his immense magic, the Archmage vows not to give the beast even a single second to unleash its attack. Sharp ice crystals suddenly materialize in the air above, catching the stunned creature completely off guard. The massive ice shards strike the dragon's neck with terrifying force and slam it brutally against the rocky ground. Arya stares in absolute stunned silence as Lucas calmly brushes the dust off his coat after the devastating attack. Recovering from her shock, Arya softly admits that the spell he just cast was actually quite beautiful. Scoffing at her surprise, Lucas reminds her that it is a reptile while Arya nervously admits she expected the scales to be much slimier. Examining the subdued beast, Lucas notes that highly evolved dragons rarely put up a fight, making their scales surprisingly easy to peel. He casually explains that once these intelligent creatures truly understand the overwhelming difference in power, they surrender without unnecessary resistance. Arya reacts with sheer panic when Lucas causally mentions that the massive dragon resting in front of them is actually still a child. Experiencing a sudden wave of déjà vu, Lucas decides he will let the clumsy creature off with just its scales since its poorly chosen lair naturally attracts guild attention. Staring down at the defeated beast, he quietly notes to himself that his disciple is being unexpectedly kind to the dangerous monster. When Lucas lazily suggests peeling off all the scales at once to save time, Arya frantically begs him not to do it. Horrified by his callous view of the dragon as mere material, she tearfully reminds him that it is an unfortunately living creature. Determined to protect the subdued beast, she spreads her arms defensively and refuses to let him harvest everything. To her absolute astonishment, the dragon slowly lifts its massive head and begins to affectionately nudge her side. Realizing the dragon is willingly offering exactly 30 scales, Lucas casually suggests she take the generous gift. Pushing her master away in exasperation, Arya sharply reminds him that they only came all this way to fulfill his selfish request. Smiling warmly at the mage, she admits that seeing his cool side up close makes the entire ordeal more than worth it. Caught slightly off guard by her genuine praise, Lucas stubbornly denies that he listened to her selfish request at all. Satisfied with their haul, Lucas briskly walks away to sell the scales to Sieg for a high price while Arya frantically calls for him to wait. Arya turns back with a bright, cheerful smile to wave a fond farewell to the gentle creature. The dragon rests peacefully in the dim light of its cavernous lair, completely safe from further harm. Several days later at the castle, Arya furiously scolds her moody master over the sheer amount of laundry his constant outfit changes generate. Exhausted by the endless piles of sour-smelling clothes, she heavily sighs that no amount of laundry baskets will ever be enough. Her frustrated domestic complaints are abruptly cut short by a strange, questioning sound coming from outside. Peering outside, she lets out a terrified shriek upon discovering that a dragon has forced its way through the warped barrier into their home. Panic completely takes over as Arya frantically yells while the little dragon stares at her innocently through the window pane. Confused when the creature suddenly vanishes from sight, she hears a noise and realizes it has moved down below. Peeking cautiously over the stone ledge, she screams in shock as the cheerfully roaring dragon enthusiastically greets her from the courtyard. Reaching out with a warm smile, the young maid happily prepares to catch the small, chirping dragon as it flutters toward her. Recognizing the creature immediately, she gasps in shock and realizes that this is the exact same dragon from their previous chaotic encounter. Embracing the startled girl intimately from behind, her master playfully ignores the beast and declares that she has become incredibly cute. Trembling under his suddenly terrifying aura, she begs him not to scare her as he ominously points out that the barrier would have barely warped if the dragon had just been this tiny from the start. Still sweating nervously from the intimidation, the bewildered disciple wonders aloud why the little beast is even here in the first place. Cradling the tiny dragon protectively in her arms, she turns to her master and anxiously asks if it is secretly their fault that the poor child was forced to come here. Without a shred of guilt, he blatantly confirms her fears, explaining that the guild likely increased their patrols after its lair was blown wide open and abandoned. Exasperated by his shameless admission, she glares at him and takes pity on the creature, noting that it wasn't its fault for being too weak to defend its home. Glancing quietly at the pitiful creature, the master pauses his cynical remarks and silently considers the situation. And so the little dragon officially joins their secluded life in the forest, though the maid can only sweat drop as her opportunistic master generously agrees to let it stay in exchange for a strict monthly rent of 1 dragon scale.